Hi, my name's Melissa, for those of you who don't know me, and I'm going to quickly go over the FBA that we had to complete for this course. So I decided to do the FBA on a student in my own classroom. The student is a 3-year-old, 2-month-old boy. He is diagnosed with autism. The way my classroom works is that I have 7 students, myself as the teacher, 2 classroom aides, and 1 child with a one-to-one. So the child with the one-to-one is actually the student that I decided to do the FBA on. The reason why I chose this student was because I'm doing an FBA for him in the real world. So we've had this student in the program since last January. Last January he spent 4 out of 5 hours typically a day in a crisis state having behaviors. So at the beginning of the year it was reduced to about 2 hours a day. Since getting the one-to-one, he got the one-to-one January 28th, so really February. The behaviors reduced to about an hour a day, but we're still not exactly where we want to be with the student, so we decided that an FBA would be the best choice for the student to see what other interventions we can provide. In my classroom, I run a teach-based classroom. Most of my students are what you would consider to be behavioral students. They are predominantly all on the spectrum. They are all nonverbal children. I run a teach-based classroom. A lot of my daily routine is heavily visual-based. We do a lot of short bursts of work in between structured break times. So within the program already, there are a lot of behavioral supports. The student just needs a little bit more. So the way that we collect data in my classroom, every child has a clipboard because, again, due to the nature of my students, we're collecting data on every child for most aspects of the day. So the behavioral data looks like this. It also has their initials on the front. I covered it up due to confidentiality reasons. On the back of the cover page is the operational definition of every behavior the student shows. The reason why I do that is because if you are maybe a sub-TA recording data for that student, or a new therapist that doesn't really know that student too well, and you don't really know what you're seeing, it's a quick reference for you. Because I know what object aggression is, but you might not. So the student shows the following behaviors: hitting, pushing, crying or screaming, object aggression, body flopping, biting, scratching. And then if you look at the next part of this, the ABC data sheets that I use in my classroom are different than the ones that were given to us for this course, but these are sheets that I actually used last year when I worked under a board-certified behavior therapist. The sheets look like this. They are easily editable to add really customized to your students' needs. So you can see on this form, it has the date, time, and the staff initials. I always want to put the initials of whoever's filling out the form in case it's not myself. I can then go back and ask follow-up questions on an event if I have questions or the form's not filled out properly. So the next area is the setting. If it's in the classroom, what activity were we doing? Are they at OT, PT, speech, playground, or transitioning? Where are they transitioning from? The antecedent, so what happened directly before the behavior? What triggered them? Was it given a demand, asked to put away an activity, transitioning, denied activity, told no, whatever it is. And then the behavior is the part that is customized for the student. So this student, again, the behaviors the student shows is hitting, pushing, crying and screaming, object aggression, body flopping, biting, scratching, and then a section for other. I also have a little part to write the duration and the frequency, depending on what behavior we're looking at. And then the final part is the consequences. So these are consequences that are typically seen in my classroom: verbal redirection, physical redirection, planned ignored, removed from the activity, and then where they were moved to. A tangible or activity is given and what that was. So for this student in particular, he comes to school with a little plastic sheep toy. It's his comfort object. A lot of the times when he's having a more severe behavior, we will give him that comfort object to help him calm down. The demand was removed, the demand was continued, or others. Maybe something such as verbal praise, or a first then board, something of that nature. So those are the behavior sheets. And then we were supposed to collect data over 5 days. I collected the data for 5 days, but on the 5th day we did have a 2-hour delay, and then the student had a medical emergency, which at that point we stopped collecting data, obviously. So I decided it would be best for this report to only report on the 4 days. In my school, the minimum requirement is 4 days, so I just ended it there. So this is what the data looks like. I chose to show the data in 3 different ways. I have 2 different line graphs and a chart. The first line graph looks like this. It is the amount of episodes seen daily, again ignoring that last day. So you'll see that the student has anywhere between 6 to 10 behavioral episodes a day for this baseline data. And something else that was very interesting to see, which we kind of noticed already, and we're like, isn't that kind of weird? But it's the longer the student's in school, the less behaviors he seems to have. So on Monday he comes in, and Monday's a high behavior day, and then like Thursday and Friday there's fewer behaviors. There's not anything different that we're doing. It's just, I think he kind of gets more into the routine, and then that regression happens over the weekend. And then like over long weekends or week-long breaks, there was a lot of regression in terms of his behavior, his work tolerance, and things like that. So the second chart, the second graph is the duration of the behaviors. So how long the student spends in a crisis behavior daily. So again, the student in January of last year would spend about 4 hours a day in behaviors. In September, he would spend about 2 hours a day. And currently, right now, he is spending anywhere between 40 to 50 minutes a day in a crisis state. So that is a lot of progress to make. We just need a little bit more. Because when you consider that the student is in behaviors for almost an hour of the day already, and then, you know, just because the behavior ends doesn't mean that we're just like right back to work. There's a recovery period, and the student in particular takes a long time to recover from the behavior and get back into the routine. And a lot of the times we found that if we push him too far before he recovers, we're back in that cycle, and that's where we get those 2-hour-long days of behaviors. So the final chart is just kind of a breakdown of how often we see the behaviors, and then my school requires us to write the severity of the behavior. For example, if the student bites, it is a severe behavior. You can really hurt somebody. But if the student is crying or screaming, that might be mild. It might be like a little disruptive whining, or it could be moderate if he's really, really upset, screaming at the top of his lungs. Again, there were 33 behaviors over the 4-day period. The most prevalent behavior seen was body flopping. He'll throw himself to the floor and refuse to get up, which happened each time, all 33 times. And then the next was object aggression, so he'll throw things or rip things up or whatever. And that happened 27 times. And then hitting and crying 21 and 31 times respectively. So other behaviors like pushing, biting, scratching, hair pulling also happened in that time, but less than 10 times. So those behaviors are more rare, maybe once a day, if even. So we, after looking at this data, noticed that the student seems to be engaging in these behaviors to avoid non-preferred activities while also obtaining a preferred object. As I mentioned before, the student has this little toy sheep where if he's in a like 10-minute long behavior or a 5-minute long behavior, we will give him the sheep to help him calm down. That is something that we think he knows. He has gotten that by now. He knows, like, we've reinforced that behavior. It's positive reinforcement. We have given him that sheep toy every time he screams for 10 minutes. If he holds out long enough, he'll get that sheep toy. And it's also to avoid non-preferred activities. A lot of times he will be removed from the activity, or the activity is postponed for him because he's screaming. And that is another thing that we need to work on, is following through with our demands for that child. Out of the 33 behaviors, 20 of them occurred when transitioning from an earned break to the next classroom activity. And then 17 were in tandem to additional demands being placed, such as go get your binder or sit down, match these pieces. So we need to work on transitions with this student. And then, as I mentioned before, 13 of the 33 behaviors resulted in him getting that sheep. So this is something that we definitely need to look at when we're creating the behavior plan, maybe earning the sheep, using a first then board, or using a timer with the sheep. These are all ideas that can be talked about with the behavior team and the classroom staff to kind of brainstorm for this child. And then looking at the FAST, just as to kind of reinforce all of the data that we took, we did end up seeing that after answering the questionnaire, the FAST says that the students primarily engaging in these behaviors for social, attention, or preferred items, which would be that sheep, or social escape from tasks and activities, which is his non-preferred activities, any transitioning from breaks to work time. So really the student is avoiding work, and he's very self-directed, and these are all things that we need to work on when we create our behavior plan. So I hope that this presentation was informative, and I will see you guys again when we talk about behavior plans.